What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Spencer. Taking a look at YCS Rio results. I believe this just went down today. I'm gonna look at like what made the top 32 and so on and so forth, and I'm gonna go through all the deck profiles I could find today. I'm sure they'll be leaking over time, and maybe I'll make another video, once a little more of a clear picture comes out for the top 32. But I figured there's a lot to talk about, and well, if you don't know, okay, I'll just get into it. If you don't know, Mystic Mind Burn won the event. And obviously, it has caused quite the uproar in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. It's a card that people have wanted banned for a long time. It really started to get a little overbearing the time that Sky Striker won. It was basically Mystic Mind Striker deck out. I mean, that's really what it came down to. And, well, not necessarily, because Sky Striker can go for a game, but clearly Mystic Mind is the only reason that Sky Striker won that tournament, right? Wouldn't have even come close otherwise. So... people are just, they're ready for it to be gone. I am too, and hopefully this is enough to send it off into the sunset. Why it's been around this long and it was banned in, the OCG, I'm not sure. My only theory, and I'm not kidding you, because the TCG ban list is ran on unfair cards, sure. There's definitely some unfair cards on the ban list, most of them are, but everybody knows it's a bit financially motivated. So I think the idea behind keeping it around this long is that it's starting to trend, right? Anytime something trends, companies, is probably good for them. I know that's a bit of a crazy conspiracy theory, but I mean, come on. I think everybody's been ready for this to go for a while. And now the fact that Mystic Mind, was trending on Twitter at some point for a lot of people, that's a big deal. And that definitely puts eyes on. People don't know what Mystic Mind is. And then once it's gone, you can have this whole new format. And hopefully it does. Otherwise, if they don't ban it on this ban list, I don't know when will ever be the time. So that's kind of my quick thoughts on YCS when it comes to, Mystic Mind Burn winning, which is so funny, by the way. I just have to point out two things before I go on to the next thing. I love that the Konami called it Burn, as if it's not literally the only reason you could ever play Burn was because of Mystic Mind. And this will definitely go down in the Yu-Gi-Oh books history as one of the craziest decks to ever win a YCS. But I just want to note that it doesn't say Mystic Mind Burn, it says Burn. Okay, yeah, sure, Konami. So let's take a look at the other top 32 list. This was from Lampy YGO. I've kind of pieced a lot of information, mostly through Twitter, if not all through Twitter. So Danger Tier Element, that was a really big deck that's been emerging, I think, more and more. And one of the things I don't think a lot of people don't realize is it's never that the best deck is the one that is always the most highly represented. It's just most people are bringing it. And I know Tier Element is super good, but you just see so many different versions of Tier Element. I always want to say Tier Element. I think it's Tier Elements. But it's really whatever people are bringing. I think most people brought Danger, to the event. So that's when most of them are going to be like that. But you're going to see a ton of different Tier Element decks in the top 32, which is definitely cool. I mean, there's Tier Element took over most of the top 32, it looks like, right? 7 Danger, which is one of the most popular just because they trigger, right? It's good. I feel the pure version of Tier Element was really susceptible to hand traps, and when you have Danger, it's just kind of infinite, continuance, plus you're drawing cards or discarding, and of course you get a ton of advantage off of the mills with Tier Elements anyways. Pure Sprite, which is crazy, right? Because there's all these Tier Element decks, all these different versions, but it really definitely seems, however the case may be, that Pure Sprite is it seems to be one of the best versions of the deck, and I think we've seen that for maybe 2 events in a row. I think the last major Yu-Gi-Oh event that Sprite had won it, and I think that it was pure, and the only thing that was crazy about it was it was running Gamma or something, which that card just seems to be getting better and better. Clearly, it would have been bad if you would have taken it to this event with Mystic Mind running around. But the cool thing is, other than Mystic Mind Burn winning, it doesn't seem too many other decks here were playing it, which of course we don't know yet, but I guess we'll have to see. It just doesn't seem off the top, yeah, there's probably a ton of decks that were maining Mystic Mind. We'll look at 4 of the top 32 decks and see if that's an actual true statement, because I've only briefly looked at them. I haven't looked at the whole deck list card by card. Sun Avalon Rika, this has probably become the most popular version of the deck. There's they're very similar, but some of them don't play Rika, some of them play different plant packages, but it seems like the field spell really is. I talked about that when it first came out, being able to tribute your opponent's monsters, obviously, just very good. And most of the time, they're quick effects. You have 2 cards, the XYZ that tributes, and the field spell, which can also trigger, because the deck is just like infinite searchers when it comes to plant monsters. 3 Math Mech, and I believe this one of them made it to the finals, which is really cool. Although, excuse me, I think it was Math Mech Adagnister. Those are 2, like, pure Math Mech obviously is like one of the most straightforward and cheap meta decks that you'll see around, you know, barring like the going second cards and all that kind of junk. But when it comes to the core set, you know, definitely the most affordable. So it's really nice to see 5 in the top 32. It's like very encouraging for, you know, budget players. The Adagnister thing is pretty wild. I would love to see. I think I have one of the deck lists, thank goodness. And hopefully it's one of the top ones. I'm not sure just quite yet. But there were some that were playing, you know, at arrival in the side deck because I thought their opponent didn't have an out to it. But I don't know what a full deck list looks like if the whole idea is that you're playing Adagnister and Math Mech together. I think this is like really, really interesting. It's because it's not like the normal Math Mech line is bad. It's just that it just seems a little underwhelming from time to time. Like if you get Ghost Spelled, it feels kind of bad because it's not really great with card advantage. Math Mech is. Despia Branded Invoked. Really funny to see Alistair in the top 32 again, but this card's always just going to be relevant. It's just a 1-card fusion summon of some pretty good monsters, so I don't think there's ever going to be a time where it's completely iced out of the game. It's cool to see it here, and plus, you know, you can activate Branded Fusion, send a light, banish it off of it, you know, Alistair if you open it, which is really cool too. So yeah, Despia Branded Invoked. I would like to see the deck list for that one. Sprite Danger Tier Lament. That's just, I don't know. I'm not exactly convinced on this deck, to be completely honest with you. I think there are other ones. Punk Sprite Tier Lament. Putting them together feels a little too much, honestly. Like, your mills are, like, more than likely going to be bad. Maybe. I guess it depends. Although, when you do have Elf, you know, if you send something to the graveyard and you can make it, you just need 1 level 2. That's always nice, and you can just bring it back and go through your combos that way. Because I don't think Elf locks you into level 2s. There's actually very few cards that do. And I think the only 2 are Starter and the XYZ. Those are probably the only 2 that lock you into 2. So it kind of makes sense. I'd have to see it a little bit more. Maybe I'm just not paying attention enough to it. But I think I've seen a couple replays, and it just wasn't my favorite. 1 Flew Under Ease. That is pretty cool. This deck is always going to be around as long as nothing gets hit, right? If Dimension Shifter got hit, I think you would see this a lot less. Like, that's pretty much one of the only reasons that it tops. But this is just a deck, like, if you draw well, you probably just win the duel. If you don't draw well, then you lose. So when you have a bunch of people bringing Flew Under Ease, statistically speaking, one of those people are going to be able to draw well throughout the event, and they're going to be in the top 32. That's how I always feel about this deck. 1 Punk Tier Lament. Yeah, like, this deck is good, and you can probably just put Punk Danger in there too, right? It's kind of the same idea. And I guess all of these are. You just make Chaos Ruler, and you get to mill 5, and you get to add 1, and then that triggers a bunch of your Tier Laments. All of that, of course, is very good. I can understand maybe Punk Sprite Tier Lament the most, even though, gosh, it just seems like you're putting a lot in the main deck. Because a lot of the Sprite monsters are darks. I don't think all of them are, but I think blue is, which is really cool. So if you could just add that, and then you've just milled Tier Laments, you of course have done some pretty cool things there. And I would imagine, like, if that happens, you probably win. But if your opponent, you know, imperms your normal summon of Xiamen, or the E-Telly version of it, you're probably hurting a little bit. Although in theory, E-Telly, they imperm, and then you can just, like, normal summon one of the Tier Lament starters that, you know, Foolish Burials and all that. That would be pretty cool, and obviously it's good enough to make it into the top 32. So I can understand where it comes. Pure Tier Lament, just a 1. Yeah, I just think this is going to become less and less popular. Marincess, and that one's pretty par for the course, right? It plays 20-ish hand traps, or 15 to 20, and then it just has 1 card play starters. That's the idea. And then just kind of have like a towers, quote-unquote towers, in the extra monster zone with some pretty cool trap cards that you can use that make your league monsters unaffected and also negate your opponent. Like, there's a lot of cool things that you can do. I think this deck is always going to be one of those decks that's just always around, because I can't imagine anything from it is going to be hit. Also gets to play cards like Goes and Match. Dinomorphia, I think this is just not a deck you see a lot in the top 32. I haven't personally seen it. I'm not saying it hasn't. It's just one of those trap decks, right? If you go first, you're just, like, way ahead of your opponent. If you don't, I know I have I think I have the Dinomorphia deck profile. I'm pretty sure I do have that in one of my 4, so it'll be cool to see what that looks like, see what kind of tech cards they're playing and everything like that. Live Twin Sprite feels like you can spam a lot of monsters on the board, and like this is, yeah, I mean, of course it's a Link 2 deck. It's just unfortunate, you know, that the Live Twin stuff a lot of the times locks you into Evil Twin special summons or Fiends, or like Dark Fiends or something like that, which obviously is just like very opposed to it. But I mean, if you can get the setup right, there's some like crazy things that you can do in terms of extenders, and plus, you know, you can normal summon the Live Twin, special summon from the deck. I don't think that locks you. I think it's only the links that do. And then you can just go into Gigantic, could say that, Gigantic, the XYZ, and do some cool stuff there. So not a big surprise to see it. It's definitely a good deck that once it gets rolling, you've just lost for sure. And then we talked about Mystic Mind Burned and Lyralist Tri-Brigade. That is not something, I mean, they feel like this is even more surprising than Dynamorphia. Tri-Brigade's always just kind of decent. Another deck that's powerful but not good on the follow-up. Normally, you're left with only like a couple cards, maybe one card in your hand. So if your opponent can break your board, then you're just in a really, really tough spot when it comes to that. But, you know, the Lyralist stuff, I guess, is good for, like, I don't know, F-Zero to even play that card. I guess I just haven't seen enough list. But it, of course, can make some pretty crazy Zeuses. And maybe that's what the whole point of that was. I'm not sure. I would have to see. But I guess there are a lot of extenders that can go into the Tri-Brigade Link monsters, and maybe that will help. But I think as time goes on, I guess we'll just have to look at that one. This ended up being like the top 8. A couple of funny things was like a Triff Gaming was in the top 8. I think Team Samurai was, I don't know his real name. He might have been in the top 8. I know he made top cuts. Jesse Cotton, I think, is like a pretty big name in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. I recognized it. So that was pretty neat. Triff was playing the Sprite Danger Tearlament. So that's pretty wild. I wanted to pull this up to see kind of what decks were there. So Frog Sprite, I mean, I think that's just Sprite in general, right? Versus Mathmech Adignister. 2 Mathmechs in the top 8. That's pretty cool. That's really cool to see, actually. 1 Pure and 1 Adignister. So it doesn't really feel like one's better than the other. And I think that's kind of true, right? Pure Tearlament, I think there was only 1 in the top cut, and it did make it. So that's pretty interesting. That would be pretty cool. Maybe I'll go back and look at their replays. And then Mystic Mind Burn played Mathmech Adignister. This was probably the worst like matchup this person could have seen, right? Because Adignister puts up a tower, which Mystic Mind Burn cares very, very little about. So I think that was just kind of really unfortunate for him to hit top 8 and be like that. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the pairings here. Or not the pairings, excuse me. We'll look at some of the deck lists. I think I only have 2 here. This was the Danger Tearlament. This made top 16 cut. Pretty nice. I think that these ratios, like, I think all of them are just ran at 3. I've seen a few lists where you cut, like, I think this one, I don't know which, I get the names mixed up all the time because their art looks way too similar in my opinion. I've seen one of them go to 2, but other than that, I think they're all run at 3. You're running a bunch of mill cards, you know, Destrudo, I guess it just uses link material, fair enough, right? And then main decking Super Poly has just become more and more popular. I'm kind of sick of this card. There is a main deck Mystic Mind in here, so maybe I was wrong about that. Mystic Mind still runs Supreme. And I think that's one of the craziest things about all this, honestly, as I've been thinking more and more. It's like, oh, by now you should, you know, be ready for the Mystic Mind matchup. But it's like, think about how hard it is to win, right? At a YCS against these combo decks. You need to have literally every card at your disposal possible. And I don't think that you can just prepare every matchup against Mystic Mind. I think that's why Mystic Mind is so good, is because it's so, the things that are good against combo decks, like the cards against them, are so bad at Mystic Mind. It's like, how many cards are you going to use? Are you going to prepare for the Mystic Mind matchup that you're going to see maybe once or twice in a tournament? Or are you going to prepare for the Sprite matchup that you're going to see probably every round, right? Or have a more than likely chance to. So that's just kind of my 2 cents. But yeah, the Danger line was pretty wild there. A lot of them are still limited, which is, I guess, probably a good thing now, seeing this deck come around. But let's look at the Super Poly targets. Dragos to pay. Oh, no, I think they just hard make Drago. Never mind. I've been seeing a lot of Topologic pop up, which is pretty cool. Which makes sense because a lot of these decks can now special summon during your opponent's turn, right? Starter can, and Tier Elements, of course, can do that very easily. Abyss Dweller, probably for the matchup, right? against for the if you play another tier limit deck. This card is obviously just kind of insane. Plenty of 4s in this deck, at least 2, so that's worth something. I don't think Mothman, I guess, is also a 4, and you can also just use instant fusion to theoretically make Mud Dragon, but it's probably also used like mostly as a super poly target. Field spells are just crazy. Foolish Burial is good in this deck. The double Pot of Desires. I can see this card going back down to 1 during the ban list, although I don't know if they'll want to swallow their pride enough for that. Konami I'm talking about. Pretty interesting to see maybe a main deck out to Mystic Mine. That's my only guess, right? And it also protects it, so like this actually has a pretty decent matchup against Mystic Mine Burn. This new TCG card, I forget what it's called, but it's like the ultimate super poly target. Hopefully this card gets banned. This is like one card that I'm really hoping to see. Only 2 of those. It kind of makes sense. It just feels like a really tight extra deck. But, when you have cards like Curious and the funniest thing is not to see access code talker, right? Because that's like the face of people who hate competitive saying like, oh, access code talkers ruin the game. Apparently it's not even worth it to play in this deck, which is kind of wild. He's also playing off. It only requires 1 level 2 monster. So there's definitely at least one of those. Kind of an interesting take on that, right? I guess the idea is you can bring it back like something like an IP and then go into Zeraboros. I mean, there's some good utility there. It is just a free monster reborn if you can make it. Nibiru in the side deck. I'm not sure what this card does exactly. Hopefully I can get a look at that a little bit later. Dark Ruler, Harpies, evenly matched was kind of wild. Looks like he was ready to play against some... I guess this was just kind of his main card when it comes to playing against like back row decks, which is fair enough. It's a very good card. Pointer of the Red Lotus, I think, is just gaining like a lot more popularity. Maybe probably take out the super polys or anything else. But yeah, I think if you can just get the out of your opponent's hand, then you win. Probably the only way to beat that is it's like someone else's own super poly. Other than that, Dark Ruler or more, you just win in Red Reboot. So he was really ready to play against. Maybe he did. Maybe a lot of people were trying to bring cards like Trap Eldritch, and everybody was just like properly prepared for it, and that's why you don't see that many in the top cut. This is that Math Mech top 4. I think this may have even gone to the finals. He's playing the new Pyro Link, which when it points to something, it negates it, so that's pretty wild. So this is pure Math Mech, obviously. Most of the time I see 2 Small World. It's pretty cool to see 3. And it almost looks like what I usually see is 2 Super Factorial and 2 of these, the Small World. Wow, to see Pot of Desires in 1 of Super Factorial, the best card in your deck, obviously it was worth it to him because he made top 4. Like, that's just kind of wild. Red Reboot seems to be very popular. He was playing D Barrier, which I just feel like that card's insane, and maybe probably won him quite a bit of duels. And Gamba, this card, I feel like if you're gonna make top cut, you kind of have to play it if you can. Obviously he wasn't, but I think on the next list you're gonna see that too, which is just kind of crazy. How many playing a lot of hand traps, right? 12, which is I feel like that's pretty. No, 15, right? 3 Nibiru, 3 Ash, 3 DD Crow in the main too, which I guess is like your opponent's gonna be using cards from the graveyard for sure, right? Was definitely probably most prepared for Tearlament and just hope that these hand traps were enough to beat Sprite, which obviously they were, because 3, 6, 9, 12, yeah, it's 15. Okay, let's just making sure. And yeah, 3 Circular, obviously, Parallel. Surprised there's no like Abyss Dweller in here. Maybe I would have cut this, but hey man, this guy made top 4. I didn't do nothing, so what am I gonna say? And last but not least is the Dinomorphia deck. So he is main decking Gamma. Again, just kind of proving that it's maybe the best card ever. Or maybe the best going second card in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it really is interesting. It's just because I'm looking at the first deck list I looked at, it was like, oh, what are the cool like tech cards? Okay, Super Poly definitely. I think it's just kind of a staple now in the main deck of this with the new TCG exclusive, right? We went over to this, and Dimensional Barrier was really good, and obviously you kind of have like the Administer builds of Math Mech, and then here you have Psychic and Punisher. So it feels like there's so many separate powerful things. So we really are in one of the most interesting formats I think that I've ever been a part of. Because when I first joined Yu-Gi-Oh, it was the Firewall era, which I know is a really weird time, right? Firewall was at its height. The FTKs, the whole 9 yards, the pre-eroded Firewalls when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh. And I feel like that was a really bad place to start. And since then, I kind of feel like this is my favorite format, maybe. If Scythe gets banned in Mystic Mine, you're going to see some of the most crazy top 32 matchups, I think, ever. We're like coming towards one of the most interactive things, and maybe totally awesome. I don't know if that's completely necessary yet. I know Sprite did win an event very recently, but I think tier limit is just right there as well. I just think that if you can get cards like that out of the format, and maybe it only just takes, because there definitely are a few ways, to out Scythe. It's not the greatest thing in the world. In fact, none of these decks outside of this one, right, because it's playing the Artifact Sanctum package, the other ones that we've seen aren't even playing it. And I know that's like the calling card for cards to get banned and everyone's sick of, and I am sick of it too. But if nothing else, these 4 or 3 deck profiles that I've seen have shown that there are some crazy stuff that you can do right now. If you believe you can achieve, if you play well, you probably have a chance to top if you're just drawing right and you're making your deck correctly, which I think is a really great thing. And it's really cool to see like the Dino package in here for XYZs, because these are really powerful XYZ monsters, some of the best rank 4s in the entire game. And he is playing the Psi frame for during his opponent's turn, right? If he activates something like Pot of Duality, only running 1. This is a very unique deck list, right? Only running 2-dimensional shifter. Like, why? Main decking the Ghost Ogre. Everyone's playing things so differently. Although this is so good against Sprite. So if he played, I would imagine he probably played a lot to get to the top 32. But other than that, I mean, I think this is pretty straightforward when it comes to Dinomorphia. It's a really weird, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so 10, 20, 30, 40. A 45 card list, Dino list. Which is pretty wild. But hey, clearly it worked out pretty well for him, considering I'm sure not a lot of Dinomorphia was brought to the event. So for him to hit top cut with it is really amazing, and shows that you can really do anything in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! As long as you have Mystic Mine in your deck, or as long as you believe. One of the two things. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Other than that, that's going to do it for today's video, and I'll see you guys next time.